The fluorescent lights of the emergency room flickered overhead as Marcus Wellington, 3, paced the sterile corridor, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the linoleum with increasing irritation. His phone buzzed incessantly. The Tokyo merger, the London acquisition, the board meeting he was missing. Every second in this god-forsaken hospital was costing him thousands, maybe millions, and all because his wife claimed she couldn't breathe. Anxiety, he muttered under his breath, loud enough for the nurses to hear. That's all it ever is with her. Drama. He didn't notice the way his wife, Sarah, flinched at his words from her wheelchair nearby, her hand pressed against her chest, her breathing shallow and labored. He didn't see the tears that had long since dried on her cheeks, or the way her fingers trembled as she clutched the armrest. He was too busy checking his portfolio to notice that the woman he'd married 15 years ago had gone pale as death itself. Marcus Wellington hadn't always been this way. There was a time when he would have moved mountains for Sarah Mitchell, the kindergarten teacher with paint-stained fingers and a smile that could light up the darkest corners of his carefully constructed world. But that was before the billions, before the empire, before success had calcified around his heart like armor. Now Sarah's needs were inconveniences. Her pain was an interruption. Her love was something he'd filed away in a drawer labeled handled, right next to their marriage certificate. And the prenuptial agreement his lawyers had insisted upon. Mr. Wellington. A young nurse approached cautiously, clipboard in hand. The doctor is still running tests on your wife. It might be another hour? Marcus cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. Do you know what an hour costs me? Do you have any idea what deals are falling apart while I babysit a panic attack? The nurse's expression hardened, but she maintained her professional composure. Sir, your wife is experiencing severe chest pain and difficulty breathing. We need to rule out. Rule out what you need to rule out. But make it fast. He waved her away dismissively. She does this every few months. Creates some crisis right when I have something important. It's manipulative, really. Textbook attention-seeking behavior. What Marcus didn't know, what he'd never bothered to learn, was that Sarah had stopped calling him when she felt unwell months ago. She'd learned to suffer in silence, to schedule her doctor's appointments around his business trips, to swallow her pain with the same grace she'd swallowed her disappointment. In their marriage. This time she hadn't called him at all. Her neighbor had found her collapsed in their garden, barely conscious, and had dialed 911. Marcus had only come because his assistant had interrupted his meeting to tell him his wife was in the emergency room. And wouldn't it look bad if he didn't show up? In the corner of the waiting room, an elderly man watched the scene unfold with sad, knowing eyes. His own wife sat beside him, their hands intertwined after 52 years of marriage, waiting for news about her hip replacement. He'd heard every word Marcus had spoken, seen every dismissive gesture, and it broke his heart. He'd watched this same tragedy play out before, with different actors, different settings, but always the same devastating final act. Mr. Wellington. A different voice, deeper and more authoritative. Dr. James Martinez stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He'd been an emergency room physician for 23 years, and he'd seen every kind of human being pass through these doors. But there was something about Marcus Wellington that made his jaw tighten. Something in the way this man had treated his dying wife with less consideration than he'd probably give a malfunctioning computer. Finally, Marcus snapped, barely looking up from his phone. What's the verdict? Can she go home? I have a dinner meeting at 7. Dr. Martinez stepped closer, his voice dropping low enough that only Marcus could hear. Mr. Wellington, I need you to put down your phone and listen to me very carefully. Something in the doctor's tone made Marcus actually comply. Perhaps for the first time all evening, he pocketed his phone and looked at Dr. Martinez, with the same expression he used on incompetent employees, bored irritation, mixed with presumed superiority. Your wife, Dr. Martinez began, choosing each word with surgical precision, has been suffering from a rare cardiac condition called spontaneous coronary artery dissection. Do you know what that is? Marcus shook his head impatiently. Just tell me. It means, the doctor interrupted, his voice hardening, that an artery in her heart has been tearing. Not from cholesterol, not from lifestyle, but spontaneously. She's been experiencing symptoms for months. Chest pain, Shortness of breath, fatigue. Based on her medical records, she tried to tell you about it. Multiple times. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus felt something cold begin to creep up his spine, but his pride wouldn't let him acknowledge it. So what's the treatment? Surgery? Medication? Dr. Martinez looked at this man, this billionaire who could buy anything except time, except compassion, except another chance, and felt something close to pity. Mr. Wellington, your wife suffered a massive heart attack approximately 40 minutes ago, while you were on your phone in this waiting room. We've been working to stabilize her, but the damage was extensive. The condition had been worsening for months, and today her artery fully dissected. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Marcus heard the words, but they didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Heart attack? Sarah was only 42. She did yoga. She ate organic kale, for God's sake. But she's fine now, right? Marcus heard the desperation creeping into his own voice and hated it. You stabilized her. She's fine. She's alive, Dr. Martinez corrected gently. And in those two words, Marcus heard everything the doctor wasn't saying. But Mr. Wellington, I need you to understand something. When your wife tried to tell you she was in pain tonight, when she asked you to take her seriously, she wasn't being dramatic. She wasn't seeking attention. She was dying. And you called it anxiety. The elderly man in the corner looked away, squeezing his wife's hand tighter, grateful for every moment they'd never taken for granted. Marcus felt his legs give out, and he sank into the nearest chair. His mind raced backward through the evening, Sarah's pale face. When he'd arrived home, her whispered plea that something felt wrong, really wrong this time. He'd rolled his eyes. He'd actually rolled his eyes at his dying wife and told her to stop being so dramatic, to take a Xanax and pull herself together because he had an important call with Singapore in 20 minutes. Can I see her? His voice came out as a broken whisper. Dr. Martinez studied him for a long moment. She's sedated right now. The next 72 hours are critical. Mr. Wellington, I've been doing this job for over 2 decades, and I can tell you that your wife has been slowly dying while you've been too busy to notice. The real question is, if she survives this, will you finally pay attention? Marcus couldn't answer. Words had abandoned him, leaving only the crushing weight of realization. How many times had Sarah tried to talk to him? How many mornings had she mentioned feeling tired, feeling off, feeling like something wasn't right? And how many times had he dismissed her with a wave of his hand? Too absorbed in his empire to see that his foundation was crumbling, he thought about their wedding day, when he'd promised to love her in sickness and in health. He'd meant it then, or thought he had. But somewhere along the way, love had become another item,